Hi, everyone. I recently had the immense pleasure of sitting down at a conference to do a Zoom interview with Brad Moser of the Physics Alive podcast. If you're not a subscriber to the Physics Alive podcast, you need to pause this video, go open your favorite podcast app, subscribe to Physics Alive, and start binge listening from episode 1. I'm in episode 12, so if you need a mid-marker to get up to, I'm in episode 12. You can work your way up there. And there's been about 30-something episodes so far as of this recording in October 2021. Like I say in the intro to the interview, Brad does an excellent job of keeping the interview focused on a salient topic for physics educators that has lots of potential applications, but he keeps it focused in such a way that you can kind of remember what the main point is and kind of go and figure out what your applications are, which I find useful because I usually listen to podcasts in the car and I can't jot down 1,000 notes, but I can remember the big idea and reconstruct what my action steps are. So I'm releasing that video here. Brad will soon be releasing that interview in podcast form on Physics Alive. So I do hope you enjoy this. Again, if you're not subscribed, go pause and do that right now and then enjoy the conversation. This conversation took place at the chapter meeting of the Florida section of the American Association of Physics Teachers in middle of October 2021. We got some great questions from our audience members, both live and over Zoom, including Ann Cox, a recent AAPT award winner and previous guest on the Physics Alive podcast. So wonderful conversation. Hope you enjoy. Welcome back, everybody. We are super excited for our first invited guest of the day, Brad Moser from Hamilton College, who for the last year now has been producing the Physics Alive podcast. I did not realize it had been a year until, Brad, you mentioned that in a recent episode. And so full disclosure, I have been a guest on this podcast. I was in episode 12, I think, which places me in the first half of that year. I did not realize it had been so long. Just to give you an idea of why you should subscribe to this podcast immediately and start binge listening from episode 1, one of the things Brad does an excellent job at is keeping his conversations with his guests focused on sort of the high-level, big-picture items, while also keeping the conversation very actionable. I always feel like I should be scribbling down notes furiously when I'm listening on my ride to work, but then I get there and I find I can remember the big idea and my one big takeaway from it. So very appreciative of that. Basically, on nearly every episode, Brad invites a guest from the physics education world, sometimes a little bit adjacent from math education or somewhere else, but he's basically working his way down the AAPT directory. Most recently, he had a series of guests talking about active learning, including Carl Wyman and Natasha Holmes, which if you've done any sort of physics education reading in the last several years, you've probably come across those names, especially talking about how we teach labs. So what we've invited Brad to do is just give us an overview of what Physics Alive is like, what you can expect in a given episode. Then I've got a few questions here I would like to ask him, just to sort of elicit a little bit more conversation. And then in our last 10 minutes or so, we'll open up the floor for general conversation. As we mentioned earlier, we are recording, and so we would like to make this into an episode of Physics Alive when we get the final version. And so if you ask a question, you may hear yourself on a future episode. So take it away, Brad.
Well, thank you so much for the invite today. In fact, there are 2 guests in the episode. Episode number 26, I spoke with Ann Cox. So there are 2 members of this very session that got a chance to be on. Maybe it'll be everybody, because anybody who's got any idea about education that is worth talking about, I want to talk with them. Yeah, this podcast is definitely a passion project, as many people maybe are starting to find that during commutes and while they're folding their laundry and washing their dishes. It's like, I would like something to listen to. And so I've listened to a number of podcasts like LeVar Burton Reads. I love listening to stories and some of the earlier ones like Science Friday. But then I started discovering some of the education podcasts, and I've kind of since my early days of teaching. So I got my PhD in 2010, and at that point I was already thinking there's got to be something different than just standing and lecturing. What are some of the other options? And I began getting interested in what there was out there. But I've always kind of wanted sort of a repository of where can I go to get this information. And yeah, there are some books, and yeah, there's lots and lots of papers that I can go look up. But I really like the audio venue, and I would love to have something I could listen to. And as maybe happens often with people, it's like if the thing that you want doesn't quite exist yet, then you go and create it, which is far more work than necessary, but at the same time, it can also be very rewarding. So I found it so rewarding to get to talk to folks. I mean, even just thinking of an example of Brian Lane here. I hadn't. He reached out to me through Twitter because I was on there, and I didn't know of the work he was doing at that time, and now. I'm following what he's doing. I'm really interested now in computation. I've consulted with him a couple of times about how I might be able to try to bring some things into the classroom. So it's already improved my own education, which, selfishly, that's a big important piece for me. But on the bigger picture side, it's can I help offer something for everybody? That you have a way that, if you're having a chance to sit and listen, that you can learn a little bit of some tidbits about what's happening in the education world, what awesome research is going on, because we don't have time to sit and read every paper in TPT that comes out, or American Journal of Physics. So, getting to talk to the authors, getting to talk about some of those papers, I think it is a way to really start helping even more disseminate what's happening in the community. So I don't know if that's sort of a good introduction to where we're going here.
Perfect. Are you ready for our question and answer time then?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, cool. So if you've listened to the podcast, some of these questions will sound familiar because I figure it's Brad's turn to have some of his common questions turned back on him. So Brad, I'd like to start with a moment of gratitude. Who has been an important mentor in your life and career, and what role have they played in shaping your path?
Well, I actually forgot a really important part, which is my beginning, which is Good Physics Day, everyone.
Oh, Good Physics Day.
I couldn't forget that part. I mean, it's always a good physics day to think about. Who is my mentor? It's interesting. In my interview with Carl Wyman, he was one of the first ones who sort of said, well, he didn't really have a mentor per se. It was sort of influences around him. And it's a little bit like that for me, at least getting into the education research idea. I was sort of in a void all by myself, surrounded, at a big R1 institution getting my PhD. And it wasn't a thing that was being talked about. So I sort of found it on my own. But I would say my mentors were the authors that I was reading. I found Eric Moser's Peer Instruction book. I found Randy Knight's 5 Easy Lessons in Teaching Physics. And these were the places where I started. And then it's upon looking at all the resources that were available then that I really started getting into it. I think my first live in-person mentor, though, was when I got to the University of New England. That was my first teaching role out of graduate school. My colleague, Jamie Visenka, was somebody who has been in the modeling instruction world for many, many years. And I was just really excited to come on board and start working with him. And he has been such a mentor for me, just, like kind of when should I pull back and maybe not take on too much, when are good places to dive into things, and just being somebody to really bounce ideas off of. And getting into the modeling instruction world, getting into the physics for the life sciences world, he helped sort of form some of those bridges for me to get into those spaces. And without his role in my life, and he's just such an amazing person with terrible jokes. I mean, he's a great person to be around. So he has meant so much for me. So I'll definitely have to share this episode with him to let him know that.
Awesome. Probing a little bit more on that. So many folks who focus on physics education or physics education research typically start with kind of the traditional, discovery research path. And then there's kind of like what you were describing, this moment of realizing, wait a minute, nobody's talking about how do we actually teach this stuff, or at least nobody around me is talking about how do we actually teach this stuff. Can you say a little bit more about how that switch got flipped in your mind?
Interestingly, I feel like a lot of the guests I speak to have also had successful careers in research, not on education, and they've had success in education. I never bothered with a successful career in regular research. I just skipped right past that because I decided during my graduate school days that's not what lit me up. The days when I had a long research day in the lab, I barely could get myself out of bed by 10 a.m. and wanted to leave as soon as possible. But the days when I had a chance to be teaching, whether it was as a teaching assistant in a lab or when I had a chance to teach some full lecture courses as a graduate assistant, those were the days that I was staying in the office till midnight trying to figure things out and waking up the next day at 8 a.m. excited. It was exhausting on one hand, but on the other hand, it was very enlivening. And I realized this is really where I want to put my energy. And I think I found it came back to, again, it came back to my interaction with students. Being at some of the bigger universities, from first my master's degree and then my PhD, being a TA and helping out with those courses, I often found there was a lot of frustration on the student end, and that they just didn't feel heard, that they felt the content wasn't relevant for them, that they weren't learning anything, that deriving equations didn't mean anything. And there's a lot of common complaints that maybe students just need to get over themselves. But on the other hand, there's a lot of things they say that, well, no, actually they're making a good point. Maybe we're not really reaching them with the way they could best be reached. They're not being heard. They're not having a class that's engaging for them. And I just kind of started seeing this message again and again, and it kind of got in my brain. There has to be something different. It's this doesn't, even when I'm sitting in the back of those lecture classes myself, it's this doesn't feel right that the professor is whipping through 70 slides in 30 minutes, and that the students are expected to know everything there to be able to solve every problem. It's that doesn't feel right, and they're just sitting there scribbling down notes or sleeping, one of the two, and maybe their outcomes are similar regardless of which they did. And I didn't like that, and it kind of got the gears turning until, like I said, sort of around 2008, 2009 is when I started picking up some of the books and realizing, there are people who have been paving this new path for quite a number of decades already, and I'm really interested in that. And for reasons unknown, that's in a way, it's that's what grabbed me, and I rolled with it.
And now that you tell that story, I'm starting to wonder if it might ever be possible someday in the future where the PER world has grown so pervasive and recruits so many students. I wonder if any students will ever have the opposite experience where they say, I worked with a PER group, I was all into physics education, then I tried doing discovery research for the first time, and now that's all I want to do. I haven't heard that story yet, but I wonder if it might be possible.
Which is great too, because right, it's all needed. This world needs all of it, and you just have to find your own strengths, right, and dive into that.
Exactly. So tell me a little bit more about sort of the seed ideas behind Physics Alive. You talked about, you realized there wasn't this resource of kind of a nice condensed sort of introduction to a lot of the innovative stuff going on in physics education. But what made you particularly choose the podcast as your venue? Why not a blog? Why not a YouTube series? Why not an encyclopedia?
The biggest question for me and my wife sometimes is why didn't I go the route of writing? She's always thought I'm a writer, I have books in me, and maybe that'll be true someday. But I don't know. I didn't want to go the direction of the blog, but again, the podcast, it was something that I've just been listening to so many of them. Just to throw a few names out, there's one called the EdSurge podcast, which I really enjoy. There's one I've been listening to for maybe 5 years now, teaching in higher education, teaching in higher ed with Bonnie Stachowiak. That's been a great show to listen to, and they're just shows that are more broadly about education, and I've just really enjoyed them. And being able to, during my morning commute, to be able to sit and learn something about education, kind of inspiring me going into the day. And I thought it's like this could be really cool for physics to have it just be physics and STEM specific. And I think there's a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit in me as well. There's always, the rock star part of you is always like, if I go big, it's like, this will be my thing. I don't know if one goes big in podcasting about physics education, but there's that little thing in the back of your mind that is like, I could do that as my living. But if that doesn't happen, this is also a whole lot of fun to be able to do this. I really like this audio part. I love getting to speak about these topics. There's something about the introvert being able to easily talk to one person or to a microphone and seemingly nobody in front of them. And I think physics is chock full of introverts. So I think there's probably a lot of head nodding. It's like, yeah. It's like, I think that's why we enjoy the teaching role so much, that, there's that, it's almost kind of paradoxical at this point that it's like there's this ability for us to be that sage on the stage as the introvert, and we like being in that role and being able to talk about what we're doing. But now, interestingly enough, we're learning that maybe the extrovert skill of guiding conversation and of being on the side and of working with lots of people is a place where real valuable education can happen as well. So that's that's an interesting little paradox that we introverts have to deal with a little bit now, I think. But yeah, I just love this audio venue and getting to talk about these topics. As so many of my physics colleagues say, it's like to their students, don't get me started. It's like, I could stand here and talk for 40 minutes, but that's not what we should really be doing here. It's like, you need to be talking about this material.
So how do you hope educators will use your podcast episodes?
I hope they will find some ideas to act on. Obviously, you're not going to act on every single one. I do, at the end of every episode, I do give a little, here's your action step for this week. And I try to not make it, here, redesign a new course. Every single time. It's usually more about, maybe go check out that website they mentioned. Go check out that paper they talked about. Try to maybe think about changing that one thing. And I don't really think you can't do that for every single episode. Especially if I ever am able to get these out weekly, which I would love to be able to do. At this point, impossible. But at some point, if that's able to happen, then it's like the action steps are fast and furious, and that'd be a bit too much. So I, of course, don't expect everybody's going to try everything, but if there are certain things that resonate, certain ideas, a certain guest that it's like, wow, that was really exciting. It's like, I wonder if I could bring that into my course. To me, it's a win if there's just one episode out of the 31 that you've picked up and said, oh, I'm going to do that, and you've changed something in your classroom, and it's been a positive experience, and you feel more enlivened. It's like right there, that would show that that all of this effort was worthwhile. Even if you try nothing and you just feel a little bit more inspired, a little bit more interested in what you're doing, that you're sharing ideas, that is awesome too. So I think there are so many ways that it could be used. Although one that I'm hoping to do along the way is that I know I don't know if it's as necessary in college education, but certainly I think in high school education, there's often counting professional development hours. And what I actually hope to do is that along the way, for each episode I have some kind of little worksheet that goes along with it, something that you could fill out a little bit, write some things down. I'd be interested in talking with like department chairs and science department chairs in high schools and think about what evidence could teachers show that, they listened to this episode, they jotted a few notes down, they thought about it, maybe they made a little change that could actually count that towards the professional development side. That's a piece that I'm thinking of. It's like, how can we transfer just listening into something maybe that's recognized as meaningful professional development?
Well, so piggybacking off of that, what's kind of your next major goal for the podcast? Where would you like to see it go in the next 50 episodes?
I love interviewing guests. So that's one that I want to continue doing about education research itself. But a couple of the other ideas I've had along the way, and one of them I've enacted once, and I'm sad I haven't gotten to it yet. There was one episode I did on the May edition of the Physics Teacher Journal. And I took 4 articles out of it, and I read them, and I highlighted them like crazy, and I just talked about them on my podcast. And that's been one of my most downloaded and listened to episodes. So clearly folks have really enjoyed that, getting sort of a sneak peek into a couple of the articles. And I tried to sort of pick a diverse array and from authors from like around different parts of the world to kind of show some of the things that are going on out there. So that was a really well received episode, and I would love to do something more of that. I've got lots of papers printed and sitting on my desk, and the time to do it just hasn't shown itself yet. But one of the other ones that I really want to do is really get into, sort of bringing physics alive through the topics we can bring into the classroom. And I would like to make episodes that students can listen to. And the first one of these that I really have in mind, well, I think the biomimicry episode I did was sort of like that. So I talked to 2 members of the Biomimicry Institute, and biomimicry is this kind of amazing mixture of biology, physics, engineering, and entrepreneurship, and trying to create solutions to kind of the world's burgeoning environmental problems. And it's something that I think could be valuable for students to listen to. They learn about biomimicry, and they can start thinking about the types of projects that could be done. So in a sense, that was, I think, an example of an episode like that. But one I have yet to do the interview for, but it's getting scheduled now, is I'm going to speak with somebody from the trekking pole company Lecky. And I want to talk about the physics of trekking poles. I love hiking, so I'm going to start with something that I'm really interested in. And we'll talk everything about, say, the biomechanics of the human body and why it's valuable to have trekking poles, but then also the physics of the poles themselves, locking mechanisms, friction, stiffness, material that is made of. So just really kind of a deep dive into, here's how we can use physics in like kind of a many layered way with, kind of a device that one might use in regular life. So that's an episode that I'm really excited to be doing soon. I've had some, preliminary conversations with somebody from the company, and if that kind of is a well-received episode, I would love to do things like that can be used in the classroom. So kind of now having multiple avenues that this podcast can be valuable for educators, both for inspiring, learning to do new things, and even bringing the content into the classroom itself.
Oh, that's great. So my last question, then we'll hand it over to our audience here for Q&A. Thinking more broadly, what do you hope to see next in the world of science education?
Oh man, that is a hard question, isn't it? I asked that one. There has been so much amazing research done for decades now in physics education. And the question comes up, and this certainly was a big topic, speaking with Louis Delarrier and Carl Wyman, it's like, why isn't it more widely adopted? It's like, what is that going to take? There's so much evidence now that shows these many varied active learning types of environments, really are so much better for education. How can we help that be more widely adopted? And of course, that's one of my goals of the podcast as well. It's like to try to get, help get this information out here in just another way. There's many ways it's getting out there. What's another way we can get it out there? Try to get it in chunks that are a little, can be manageable, actionable. But I really hope to see that, and research should obviously continue in education research, absolutely. But there's so much great stuff that's done, and I really want to put my focus on, how can we get out there what has already been done? How can we help inspire, encourage, and assist people who want to begin using it in their classroom? Because it's not an easy transition. I don't think it's easy at all. It can be a scary jump. The students can bark about it and complain because they were so used to sitting passively listening, and that seemed fine to them. So there are a lot of factors that have to be considered, a lot of buy-in for the faculty, for the students. But what's the support that we can give to help get more people there? So I think that's one big piece. And then another big piece is as Bree Barnett Dreyfus put it in my episode about the Step Up program. It's like physics has an image problem. That it's been this white male dominated field for so long, and it's sort of the slowest one to be changing right now. And I've talked to a number of guests about this, and it has become a piece that I really want to make sure I'm paying attention to with this podcast. That it's not just about educational initiatives, but it's also about where are we in the physics teaching world? What good can we do to help make it a more diverse place, a more inclusive place that we can welcome physicists from everywhere around us, and make it a welcoming space for absolutely everybody. So that's a piece that's important to me, that I think there's a lot of work to be done in the world, and that I think physics, we can really jump into that and lend our hand there and really make this a better discipline than when we came into it. So I think those are kind of my two big things that I'm hoping to see.
Well, then on that last point of representation, you absolutely do an excellent job of that on the podcast with your selection of guests, the question you ask them, and just you letting them tell their story and kind of have the floor, and using your voice is a wonderful example of how we can move forward with that. So
thank you.
All right, why don't we open the floor for questions from our audience? If you've listened to an episode, feel free to ask a particular question from an episode, or if you've not, the floor is open for Q&A with Brad here.
I have a question.
Go for it, Joe.
Hi, Brad. My name's Joe. I work here at UNF. So my question is just about podcasting. You're the first actual podcaster I've ever communicated with. And so I hope this isn't too off the wall. Do you get paid for your podcasts? And do you have like media sponsors and all that sort of thing? Or?
That would be nice.
I do not, with the caveat of the word yet. Right now, and I think a lot start on the free aspect of things. My hope is that I can make a little bit on the side, at the very least to cover expenses, because they're website costs and podcast hosting costs. I'd like to get some fancier equipment. I've got some decent stuff, but I left my microphone on campus. I'd love to also have a good microphone at home, so I could not have to travel back and forth. So I actually started a Patreon page. If you are aware of the Patreon world. So basically I can get sponsors through that, basically just people donating. So that's kind of my first step into thinking about that. There's lots of different avenues. I've listened to, bunches of business podcasts, which I'll have to say, give credit to some of those for inspiring me to even get started with jumping into the world of podcasting. I blame, have you ever heard of Pat Flynn? I blame him for, really lighting a fire under me to give something a try. So yeah, I'm hoping that along the way, there'll be a little revenue that comes in just to, like, at the very least pay for some of the costs, and maybe sort of replace some, online sections that I teach on the side to make a little bit of extra money. It's like, just to have a little extra pocket income from this would be awesome. But at the moment, I think it starts slow, so not yet. But if you know of any, wealthy donors who are looking to support it, let me know.
Maybe a related question, Brad. When it comes to your annual report, where do you place this activity?
You know what? I have, oh boy. I've not really had an annual report since I got it going yet.
Okay.
I do, well, since I have been in lecturer positions in the past, I'm currently, well, it used to be called a lab technician role. Now it is an assistant professor of instruction. So I have no research obligation. So at the moment, I don't need it to count for something, but it's one of those that I'm sure doesn't hurt. So I definitely am thinking of in terms of putting it under my scholarly activity and as sort of my outreach effort.
Yeah, Brian.
So, Brad, you talked about the episode where you did a summary of some
physics teacher articles, and you enjoyed that one. I was wondering if there are any other sort of top hits or favorites, looking back at all the ones you've ever done, any ones which were your absolute favorites?
Oh yeah, okay. So I pulled up my episode list just so I can kind of scrape through. I mean, it was really exciting to talk with Carl Wyman. I felt a little fanboy on that one, getting to speak to somebody that was a Nobel laureate and then has gone on to, help create the FET project and to be doing so much. So that was one of the ones I felt a little nervous for. I was really excited to do my episode with Karen Catlin. She wrote a book called Better Allies. And, I had subscribed to her newsletter over a year ago. And in the newsletter, she gives 5 little tidbits about how we can be better allies in our workplace. And it was something where I'd followed her work for a bit. And just in those little tidbits, I found so much value for myself and started changing the way I was thinking a little bit. And so I was really excited to get a chance to talk with her. What are some other ones? It was a really fun conversation with Rhett Elaine, who does a lot of posting, sort of like blog style posts with wired.com, and makes a bunch of videos. So that was a really fun conversation. I remember we laughed a lot in that one. Joe Reddish, that was episode 7 for me. I really respect Joe and the work he's done. And, he's so involved with that intro to physics for the life sciences, which is a field that I've jumped into. So he and the work he has done has been such sort of a mentor from a distance for me. And I just love talking with him. He's one of those that I'm already thinking about bringing him back on the podcast to talk with again. I'll have to say on a personal note, the episode with Brian Lane here, I learned so much from that one. Coding, I've always felt a little trepidation, and he's definitely helped change my attitude about that. And it's also exciting because I feel like there's also a friendship that has emerged from that episode as well, and that has been sort of a little extra bonus. I know. Yeah, I just look at my list. I love all my episodes. I've loved talking with everybody. I tell my wife every time I finish an interview that it's like I just feel enlivened and uplifted, and like there's sort of this energy coursing through me. It's like that was an amazing conversation. I felt like I learned so much. I feel so much more passion for this field of education. So that that little hit of dopamine, if that's the one I get from these, if I got the right neuroscience there, it makes it worth it for me to do the interview sometimes.
I've not seen any questions in chat yet. Folks on Zoom, do feel free to unmute your mic or send us a question in chat. Maybe we can throw out a question for Anne. Anne, what was your experience like being a guest on the podcast?
Yay.
It was really great. Honestly, Brad is a great interviewer. So if he contacts you, say yes. You'll learn a lot about what you do and why you do it by talking with Brad. Honestly, it was a great experience. I was nervous about it and afraid that I was going to say something that would make me look foolish or something. It was a lot of fun. So yeah.
He also edits these very well. So
yes.
If there's anything that you say and like I don't like that, it's like I'll take it right out. It's fine. No. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the conversation with Anne and Brad Talbert. Those were also more episodes I would love to do because AAPT hands out so many awards, and I feel like I should talk to everybody who gets one. But I just kind of focused in on the 2 like education ones and said, let's just do a little interview about that. Those were also very widely listened to and like downloaded quickly compared to some of my episodes. So it seemed like there were folks who were interested in hearing sort of something that was very recent. And it was just great learning from, educators that, have been impactful in the community and have, garnered the attention from folks around them as having done an amazing job. And, after those 2 conversations, I'm like, well, yeah, of course, I just heard this person. They're an amazing human being. And when you let an amazing human being teach students, then good things are going to happen. So, and thank you for being an amazing human being. I don't need questions. I just need new listeners. Listen to the podcast.
Go ahead.
Joe again. It just occurred to me, since you're all the virtual media stuff, can you like interview people from different countries who are speaking different languages? Is there like software that will convert language quickly enough that you can like interview, talk to Russian Academy of something sciences if they'll let them, I mean?
That is a really interesting question. My mind had not gone there yet. I wonder, I mean, I feel like with a YouTube video, you could have that conversation and you could have the transcription below. I don't know what an audio closed caption would sound like. That would be really obnoxious. I mean, I guess I hear it in radio interviews where you kind of hear the voice in the other language sort of faintly in the background, and then the American translation, the English translation.
There's a Patreon goal for you to get a translator service.
There you go. No, that's a really interesting idea though, and it would open up a world of possibilities quite literally.
Kevin Thomas in chat says already downloading episodes. Super excited with it.
Woohoo! All right.
So
I'll see a spike today in my.
You'll see a little spike today. What data do you get on your podcast performance? Do you get subscribers, downloads? What metrics are you looking at?
There's so few metrics in the podcasting world, and podcasters all around are very dismayed that it's not the same sort of metrics that something like YouTube has. Basically, I can see how many people downloaded an episode in a given day, and that's it. That's all I get. It's like how many downloads a particular episode got, and sort of the aggregate of all of them. So I know they're being downloaded, and that's motivation enough to keep going at this point.
Awesome. And then Leela Tosh in chat just subscribed on Spotify.
Spotify, perfect. Yeah, anywhere.
Yeah, I guess the other big difference between podcasting and YouTube, because I have a YouTube channel and I can see all of my stats because they're all coming from the same place. With a podcast, people are downloading it from who knows how many services.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, you don't even know if you'll necessarily get all those numbers.
Yeah, I don't even know if somebody listened for 5 seconds and then stopped listening and it was counted as a download. So yeah, I really have very little information, but I occasionally get emails from folks saying that was a great episode. Thanks for sharing that. I know somebody's listening all the way through. So that works for me.
And this is Joe again. And your main platform to launch your stuff out there in the first place, that's Spotify, or like when you?
No. So I use a podcast hosting service called Podbean, but there are many different ones. But basically, the file gets uploaded. There's an RSS feed created, and then I've submitted that to all of the big regular podcast places. So Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, a number of others that were recommended. So pretty much just about anywhere you would want to be downloading your podcasts, wherever you regularly listen to them, you can find the show there.
Awesome. Well, this has been a great conversation. I know we are due for a morning break. We know you have some obligations to get back to, Brad. So why don't we thank our invited speaker.